It's a wonderful privilege now for me to introduce a personal hero whose courage, selflessness, and idealism I find awe-inspiring, and ask him to accept an award on behalf of another personal hero, a man of very great courage and selflessness and idealism, Boris Nemtsov. Vladimir Kara-Murza is a deputy leader and co-founder with Boris of the People's Freedom Party. He's a leading coordinator of Open Russia. In the United States, Vladimir was a prominent and very effective advocate for passage of the Magnitsky Act, which President Obama signed last December. Most recently, he has eloquently and persuasively campaigned to expand the act to impose sanctions on those Russian journalists who are so cowed and corrupted by the Kremlin, they've become indispensable to propagating the lies and the atmosphere of hate, fear, and violence the regime relies on to maintain power. Vladimir is a brave, outspoken, and relentless advocate for freedom and democracy in Russia. All of his adult life, and even as a boy, he has been a steadfast champion for the rule of law, for justice, for truth, for the dignity of the Russian people. And like others in Russia who place the interests of the Russian people before their own self-interest, he has paid a price, a heavy price, for his gallantry and integrity. In May of this year, he grew very ill and fell into a coma. As has happened to other Putin critics, Vladimir was poisoned in order to intimidate him, or worse. His family brought him to the United States for treatment this summer, and we're all very relieved and grateful that he is recovering and able to be with us tonight. Vladimir, you are an inspiration to the work of this institute and to me personally. Your work is crucial to the progress of freedom and justice in the world. You're a credit to your family and your country. You've kept faith with your ideals in confrontation with a cruel and dangerous autocracy, and you have kept faith honorably and bravely with the example of your friend and comrade, Boris Nemtsov, who died a martyr for the rights of people who were taught to hate him, but who will one day mourn his death, revere his memory, and despise his murderers. Boris Nemtsov is a hero of the Russian Federation. He doesn't need a posthumous gold star to deserve that distinction. What worth is a decoration from the hands of a tyrant and the sycophants and crooks who surround him? What meaning would it have? He is beyond the calumnies and scorn and cruelty of his enemies now. Freedom salutes Boris. Justice proclaims him a hero. The truth reveres his memory. Putin could never understand Boris. He could never appreciate how someone could be impervious to threats and slander, to the lure of corruption and the oppression of fear. A man like Putin, who all his life has stood on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of morality, of goodness, can't comprehend the power of righteousness. He is blind to the supremacy of love. He can't see that all lies are exposed eventually. Hate is overcome by love. Illicit power decays while the truth endures forever. The people who killed Boris and the regime that protects them are the enemies of the Russian people. They rob Russia of its wealth, its hopes, its future. They deny the God-given dignity of the people they misrule. They are thieves and murderers, and they are cowards. They fear justice. They fear truth. They fear a society in which ideals and morality are the foundation of law and order. Boris wasn't afraid. He knew his enemies. He knew what they were capable of, but he would not be oppressed. He would not be oppressed by unjust laws or by violence and fear. He was a free man, and bravely so. He was accustomed to danger, but he lived for love and justice and truth. He had been threatened repeatedly and demonized by the regime's propaganda apparatus. Yet when his enemies took his life in the shadow of the Kremlin, They found him walking in the open air, enjoying the evening, unafraid. It was an honor to know him, and among the greatest privileges of my life, to call him a friend. For his courage, for giving the last measure of devotion to his country and his countrymen, IRI awards the 2015 Freedom Award to the late Boris Nemtsov. May we long find inspiration in his example. May we take renewed devotion to the cause he died long to advance. And may we too live unafraid in the open air for love and justice and truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you so much, Senator McCain. I know that Boris would have been particularly fond of the fact that it is you who are presiding over tonight's ceremony. Every time we'd plan his trip to Washington, however short it was, however packed the schedule, he would always say to me, make sure we see McCain. Make sure we see McCain. And every time he left those meetings at 241 Russell Senate Office Building, invariably impressed with the level and depth of your understanding of Russia and the post-Soviet world. I think it is fair to say that Boris Nemtsov's opinion of you was diametrically opposite of the opinion of the person who is currently sitting in the Kremlin. So many things about Boris were diametrically opposite from that person, both as a politician and as a human being. He was kind and decent, humble and full of self-irony. He was always ready to help others and never one to boast about it. As a political leader, Boris Nemtsov was always a maverick. He always said what he believed, and he always did what he said. He never betrayed his principles or his friends. He never profited from the many high government offices he occupied, a rarity in my country. And he never put his personal interests above the interests of his nation. He valued freedom and dignity, both his own and those of others. And above all, he always did what he believed was right, not what was easy, expedient, or profitable. As a young leader of the anti-communist movement in Nizhny Novgorod, he ran for the Russian parliament against the establishment at the age of 30 and won. Just a year later, as the communist regime fell and the old party apparatchiks simply ran away, he found himself governor of a large industrial region on the verge of economic collapse, and within just a few years transformed it into Russia's economic miracle, the hub of free market reforms. And leaders from across the world, including from this country, went to visit Nizhny Novgorod and its reformist governor to see the changes with their own eyes. For its unparalleled media pluralism, Nizhny Novgorod under Governor Nemtsov was known as the land of untamed journalists. As the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia in the late 1990s, he tackled government corruption, crony capitalism, and the oligarchs head-on at the expense of his own political advancement. As US Congressman Bob Livingstone said after meeting Boris Nemtsov, this guy is simply too good to be true, except he is true. He always did what he believed was right, whether when he placed 1 million signatures against the war in Chechnya on President Boris Yeltsin's desk, or when he led the protests against Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. In the last 15 years, as my country entered another authoritarian spell, and as so many of Boris's former political colleagues chose the comfortable path of silence or collaboration, he continued to fight for his beliefs, regardless of the cost. His was the loudest and the clearest voice against the abuses, the corruption, and the aggression of Putin's rule. And to many friends, including Senator John McCain, who voiced concern about his physical safety and urged him to leave Russia, he would answer one and the same thing, as I'm sure you will remember. This is my country. I have to fight for it. He gave everything he had to that fight. and in the end, he gave it his life. Boris Nemtsov was destined for much more. He was undoubtedly the best president that Russia never had. But our country is fortunate to have had such an authentic, principled, and visionary political leader. I'm fortunate to have had such a great colleague and such a true friend. So I want to thank the International Republican Institute for this honor. And I gratefully and humbly accept this award for Boris Yefimovich Nemtsov as recognition that his life, his fight, and his example are not and shall never be forgotten. Thank you very much.